Hi everybody, welcome to Live Blogger. In this video I'll show you how to design this contact form using HTML and CSS. So here we can see we have this heading and these input fields over here, and if I click on any of these we also have this outline, and we also have this hover effect for this button, and this is also responsive. So if I decrease the width of the browser window, this is how it will look on a smaller screen. So we're going to design this using HTML and CSS from scratch in this video. So let's get started. Right here I have created this folder called Contact Us, and I just opened it with VS Code. Now let's create the necessary file. So let's click on New File, and let's create an HTML file. I'll just name it index.html. And let's create a CSS file. I'll just name it style.css. And let's start with the index.html file. Now in VS Code you can just press exclamation and press tab, and you'll have this basic HTML5 code. And let's link our CSS file over here. So here I'll just type style.css in the href. Alright, now the first thing we will do is we'll create a container division, and let's give it a class of contact container. And in this, the first thing we need to have is the heading. So let's create an h2, and let's tap get in touch. And then we need to have this subheading. So I'll just create a p tag, and let's give it a class of subheading. And here I'll just copy this text from here, and I'll just paste it over here. Right, now the next thing we need to have is this form. So in this form we need to have labels and input fields. So let's create a form element. So I'll just tap form. And in this form, the first thing we will do is we'll create this top section. So here we have the input fields for the name and email. Now we'll create a separate section for these two input fields because we want to have them displayed one below the other on smaller screens. So let's go ahead and create a division with the class of top section. Right, now in this top section we need to have this label and this input field for the name. So for this I'll just create a container division, and let's give it a class of group. And in this we need to have the input field and the label. So I'll just type input, and we'll set the type to text, and we also need to have this label. So let's create a label over here, and for the label we need to have the ID inside the for attribute. So here let's create an ID, and here let's type full name, and here in the for attribute let's type full name, and here let's type full name or your name. Right, now let's open this in our browser and let's see how it looks. So I have this extension called Live Server installed in VS Code. So once you have this installed, you can just right click over here in the HTML and click on Open with Live Server. And now we can see that our design is displayed in the browser. Now if you go back to the original design, here we can see we also have this icon for this input field. So what I will do is I'll just add this input field inside a container division. So let's create a division with the class of input container, and in this we will have this input field, and here let's add the icon. So for that we will use heroicons.com. Right, here I'm in heroicons.com, and let's search for user, and I'll just copy this SVG from here. Let's go back and let's paste it over here just before the input field, and now we can see we have the icon and the input field. Now let's go ahead and create the input field for the email. So here outside this division with the class of group, let's create another group. So let's type group, and in this we need to have the label first of all. So let's type label, and we will have an ID of email for this, and here let's type your email. And now even for the email input field we need to have this icon. So let's create a division with the class of input container, and in that we need to have the icon and the input field. So I'll just type input, and here for the ID I'll just type email, and here inside the input container let's add the icon. So let's go back to Hero Icons, and let's search for email, and let's copy this icon from here, and I'll just paste it over here. Right, now the next thing we need to do is we need to create this text area for the message. And let's go ahead and do this outside this top section. So here we have the top section. So let's go outside the top section, and here let's create a group, and in this we need to have the label, and here I'll just tap message, and here I'll just tap message. And now let's create a text area, and for the text area we don't need to have any icon, so I'll just create a text area over here. And here for the ID, let's tap message, and I'll just delete these columns and rows from here. And now the last thing we need to do is create this button. So for that, let's create a division with the class of button container, and in this we need to have the button and the icon. So let's go back and let's create an input field, and for the type I'll just set it to submit, and for the value let's set it to send. And even for this button we need to have the icon, so let's go back and here let's search for the icon. So I'll just tap send, and I'll just copy this SVG from here, and let's go back and let's paste it over here inside the button container. And with that we have completed writing the HTML of our design. So let's go back to our browser, and this is how it looks. Now let's go ahead and style this using CSS. So let's go to a style.css file, and first of all let's target the container division, which is this division with the class of contact container. So just tap contact container, and for this we will set a max width of 700 pixels, and we'll also bring it to the center of the screen. So I'll just tap margin, 32 pixels top and bottom, and auto for left and right. And let's set the font family to Roboto, and let's set the color of all the text to 023047, and we'll also set a padding of 0.32 pixels for smaller screens. And this is how it looks right now. Now before styling anything else, let's go ahead and decrease the height of these icons so that we can see all the design clearly. So here I'll just tap contact container, and we have SVGs for the icon. So let's tap SVG, and let's set the height to 20 pixels. Right now let's style this heading. So here let's tap contact container, H2, and let's set the font size to 48 pixels, and let's set the margin to 0. And now let's style this subheading. So for the subheading we have this paragraph with a class of subheading. So I'll just type contact container, subheading, and let's set the font size to 16 pixels, and let's set a margin top of 8 pixels. And if we decrease the width of the browser window, here we can see that the line height is too less. So here let's type line height, and let's set it to 1.8, and I think that looks alright. Now let's go ahead and create this underline that we have over here. So for that let's create an after element. So here I'll just tap contact container, subheading : after, and we need to position this after element relative to the subheading. So here let's tap position relative, and here let's tap content, and if we just type, let's say 1 2 3, then here we can see after the subheading we have 1 2 3 displayed. Now we don't want to display anything, we just want to display a line. So here I'll just set the position to absolute, and let's set the height of the element to 1 pixel, and let's set the width to 50 pixels, and let's set the background color to 0096C7. And now we can see we have this line, and we need to bring it to the bottom. So for that let's go ahead and set the left position to 0 and the bottom position to -12 pixels. And now we can see that the underline is in the correct place. Right now let's style this form element. So here we can see we have this form tag. So here let's tap contact container, form, and let's set the display to flex, and let's set the flex direction to column, and let's add a gap of 8 pixels Right now let's style these input fields. So let's type contact container form input, and let's set the width to 100%, and let's set the padding to 10 pixels top and bottom, and 16 pixels left and right. Now I think the width of these input fields is more than expected. So if I just go over here to the container, and if I just add a background color, here we can see that the width is a lot more. So for that we have to add a line of code in the CSS. Here we need to type contact container and also all the elements inside contact container. So contact container asterisk, and here we need to type box sizing, border box, and now we can see we have the correct width. So let's remove this background color, and let's continue styling this input field. Let's go ahead and set the font size, and let's set the font size to 16 pixels, and let's also remove the border. So I'll just type border 0, and let's add some border radius. So I'll just type border radius, and let's set it to 4 pixels, and we'll also add a box shadow. So just type box shadow, and let's set the values to 0, 5 pixels, 15 pixels, 0, RGBA, 0, 0, 0, and 0.15, and this is how it looks. Now we also need to add the same styling to this text area, so let's add that over here as well. So just type contact container form text area. Now here for the text area we need to change the font, so here I'll just type font family, and let's set it to Roboto. Now when we hover over this, we have this outline. We need to change the color of this outline. So here let's type contact container form input colon focus, and contact container form text area colon focus, and let's set the outline to 1 pixel solid, and let's set the color to 0096C7, and now we can see we have the correct outline. Now let's increase the height of this text area a little bit. So here let's tap contact container form text area, and let's set the height to, let's try 200 pixels. I think we can decrease it. Let's try 140 pixels, and I think that looks alright. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to place this icon inside this input field. So for that let's go ahead and set the position of the container division of the input field, which is input container to relative, and then we can set the position of the SVG to absolute. So here let's type contact container input container, and let's set the position to relative. And now for the SVG, which we have selected over here, so for the SVG let's type position absolute, and let's set the top position to 50%, and now it starts from the 50% mark, so we need to type transform translate y minus 50%, and now it is exactly in the center. And from the left let's add a position of 8 pixels, and now the icons are positioned correctly. Now we need to bring the text to the right a little bit, so for that let's add some padding left. So here for the input let's type padding left, and let's set the value to 36 pixels, and I think that looks alright. Now here for the text area we don't need to have any padding on the left because we don't have any icon. So here for the text area let's type padding left, and we'll set the default padding left, which was 16 pixels. So let's type padding left of 16 pixels, and that looks alright. Now here we can see that for the button we have the icon over here on the left side, so we need to bring this icon inside this button. So let's go back, and here for the input container we have this position of relative, So we will do the same for the button container, because for the button we have this division with the class of button container. So here let's type comma contact container button container, and now we can see that the icon is inside the button. Now let's go ahead and style the button. So for the button, let's type contact container button container, and let's set the width of the button to 160 pixels. Let's set the margin top to 8 pixels. Now for the button, we need to have this icon on the right side. So here we can see that the icon is on the right side. So let's type contact container button container SVG, and let's type left, and we will unset the left value, and we'll set the right value to 8 pixels. Now let's go ahead and change the actual button. So for the button we have this input with a type of submit. So here let's type contact container input with a type of submit, and for the button let's set a background color, and let's set it to 023047, and let's set the color of the text to white, and even for the SVG let's set the color to white, and let's set the text align to the left. So here let's type text align left, and we need to set the cursor to pointer. So let's type cursor pointer, and now we can see when we hover over this we have this pointer. And let's also add a hover effect. So here for the button container, let's type contact container button container colon hover, and let's set the transform scale to 1.03, and we will have a smooth animation. So let's tap transition, and let's set it to all 300 milliseconds ease, and here we can see we have this hover effect. Right now the next thing we need to do is we need to set these two input fields one next to the other on larger screens. So for that we have this division with the class of top section. So let's target that. Here let's tap contact container top section, and let's set the display to flex, and we will have a gap of 16 pixels between the elements. Now we can see that these elements are not taking up the full width. So for that we have to target these individual divisions. So here we can see inside the top section we have groups. So let's target the group. So here I'll just tap contact container group, and we need to set the flex to 1. And now we can see they take up the full space. Now let's also add some gap between the label and the input field. So I'll just make this also a display of flex, and let's set the gap of 8 pixels. And we also need to set the flex direction to column. So let's tap flex direction column, and now we can see it looks alright. Now let's add some margin bottom to this top section, so that we have some gap between the message and these two sections. So here for the top section, let's tap margin bottom, and let's set it to 12 pixels. Now we need to have some gap between this subheading and this form. So let's target the form, and here's the form. Let's add a margin top, and let's set the margin top to 32 pixels, and I think that looks alright. Right now let's go ahead and write the CSS for smaller screens. So I just decrease the width of the browser window, and when we are on a smaller screen we need to display all these input fields one below the other. So here for the top section we had set a display of flex. Now we need to set the flex direction to column for smaller screens. So here I'll just add a media query. So I'll just type at media max width of 600 pixels, and here let's tap contact container top section, and let's set the flex direction to column. And that's basically it with the smartphone version. So with that we have completed designing this contact form using HTML and CSS. Alright, so that's basically it for this video. If you have any doubts you can ask in the comments below, and if you like this video please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.